Hello, everyone. Welcome to the KTAL News Now Digital Streaming Center. I'm Brittany DeFran. And former President Donald Trump was found guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records. 12 jurors in New York came to a unanimous decision after 12 hours of deliberation. And joining me here today, I have here with me Parr. He is a local political analyst to break down what comes next and how this could possibly impact the Trump campaign as he is currently in the running to be president of the United States. Hi, Stephen. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Brittany. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So happy to have you here today with us to talk a little bit about this and take a diver deep in this. There's a lot of information all over social media just spiraling as this verdict came down yesterday. So just wanted to take a look at all the facts and really paint the clear picture for our community in regards to what happens next moving into November. This is a state level offense. So how could we explain that to our community members in regards to how this impacts the Trump campaign while he is running for president?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned it's a state level offense because it's really only partially a state level offense. The only way they were able to make it a state level offense was to bring in what should have been national level offenses. And this is why people who are supporters of Donald Trump, one of the many reasons why people who are supporters of Donald Trump are so upset, because in order to get the state level offense of felony misreporting of documents, felony misreporting of accounting information, you had to bring in a federal offense of election fraud, which they didn't actually prove in the case and the jury didn't have to actually convict on. So this is why it gets very, very confusing, because this is a novel legal theory. No one's ever been tried for this before, certainly not in this way. And Donald Trump was never convicted of the other crimes that were required in order to have him convicted in this crime here. So it's a convoluted mess, and there's a reason why people are confused about it online. Is because the ruling itself is mixed up. How does this affect the Trump campaign moving forward? That is a really, really good question. This is 100%. Well, actually, it's not quite 100% unprecedented, but it's close. There's only one other example in American history where you have someone who was running for president who was in jail at the time, and that's Eugene V. Debs. He was the nominee for the Socialist Party. He ran 4 times for president for the Socialist Party in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, and in 1920, he was running for president from a prison cell. He had been convicted of, I believe it was treason back during World War I, because he spoke out against the war. So Woodrow Wilson had him thrown in jail, and so he campaigned for president from jail. That means it's possible to do. Donald Trump, if he's in jail, he can still run for president, even if it's not a federal jail, it's a state jail. He can still run for president. It becomes more difficult to do because one of the biggest strengths he has as a campaigner is the ability to generate large crowds. And obviously you can't really do that from a jail cell. Eugene V. Debs back in 1920 used to go to his jail window and read speeches out through the window, and a couple dozen people would show up every now and then and listen to him. They don't really make prisons the exact same way now. So Donald Trump would have to do that from Twitter, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you make a lot of really good points in regards to this being a very convoluted and historic case and situation, right? You say nearly pretty much unprecedented. And when we look at that, you say that he can campaign from his jail cell, and so that's clarifying that this doesn't mean that he can no longer run. He can.
Right.
Yeah, after
Yeah,
sentencing, after this verdict came down, it doesn't take him out of the race.
absolutely not.
Hmm.
It doesn't take him out of the race. He can still run for president, even though he's been, according to this jury, convicted of a crime. There's still a lot of questions as to whether any of this holds up to election day, whether it gets overturned either by a New York court or by the Supreme Court. There's a ton up in the air right now. There's a lot of stuff that we really don't know, and we're not going to know. Because there are a lot of moving parts to this. But one of the things we do know is what the Constitution says. And the Constitution says that if you're a natural born citizen and you're over 35 years of age, well, you can run for president. Well, Donald Trump is both of those things. He's much older than 35 years of age. He's a natural born American citizen. He's been here his whole life. His wife couldn't run for president. Melania couldn't run for president because she was naturalized. She was born over in actually in she was born in a communist state over in I believe Yugoslavia at the time, Hungary, anyway, Eastern Europe. So she can't run for president, but Donald Trump certainly can. Had he been, this gets actually back to impeachment. So Donald Trump's the only president who's been impeached twice, but that doesn't stop him from running for president because Donald Trump was not convicted in the Senate in either one of those impeachments. Had he been convicted in the Senate for either one of those impeachments, that would stop him from running for president. And in my mind, that's the main reason why Democrats went forward with the second impeachment, even after he was out of office, was to try and stop him from being able to run for president in the future. So an impeachment can stop that. A conviction on a state felony, state crime, it doesn't stop it at all.
And you did a great job in like going in depth in regards to the qualifications for someone to run for president. That was definitely something I wanted to kind of clarify because that is something that's not a part of this. Is regards to that verdict being guilty, it has no implications to him qualifying to run for president.
And you're welcome to check my math on that. That's in the Constitution,
Yep.
Article 2, section, I believe,
and I believe it's section 2 as well.
Section 2, you're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
So it is right there. Yeah, it's right there in the Constitution for anyone in the community to double check and fact check. That is factual information right there. And as we continue to just share this factual information with our community and kind of debunking this false information that is spiraling across social media, I'd like to talk a little bit about the fact that many are saying that if he is elected, he can then pardon himself off of some of these off of the verdict and depending on what happens with sentencing. Why is that not possible in this case? Can you explain that for us?
I can. It comes back to the state issue. Again, back in Article 2, Section 2, it says that the president shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Well, this isn't an offense against the United States. This is an offense against the state of New York. So the Constitution doesn't actually give him the ability to pardon himself for this crime. Now, there are two federal cases that he would be looking at, the Jack Smith cases, where he could pardon himself for both of those. But not these state cases, not the state case out of Georgia, nor the state case out of New York, nor any of the civil cases that have come up over the last couple of years. So just like Bill Clinton couldn't pardon himself from the civil cases dating back to Whitewater and to the Monica Lewinsky issue and Linda Tripp and all the women that were suing him, he couldn't pardon himself from those. Those were state issues and those were civil issues. He could have technically pardoned himself from a crime against the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely clarifies that in regards to that. This is a state level offense, as we have mentioned multiple times now, and that is the reasoning why he wouldn't be able to pardon himself, as Stephen Parr just clarified for you guys right there. As we continue moving forward and what's to come and what's next, Trump will then go through sentencing on July 11th. You mentioned it yourself that he could campaign behind those jail bars there, behind bars. He can campaign, but could he find himself behind bars? Is that something that people are suspecting will happen on sentencing day on July 11th?
It's absolutely possible. And I generally, when I'm trying to understand what people will do to predict people's behavior, a lot of times I'll look at what they have done already. Judge Mershon is solely in charge of that sentencing. And when you look at his rulings in this case, basically every time he could have ruled against Donald Trump, he pretty much did. Egregiously so in my mind, several times. Usually defendants get the right to free speech. Judge Merchant didn't like some of the things that Donald Trump was saying, so he took that right to free speech away, the right to defend himself actually in the public. So I basically don't have any faith that this attorney, this judge, wouldn't be willing to put the former president of the United States in jail. And there are many, many people in this country who would celebrate that, who would enjoy that a lot. And I think that it's reasonable to assume, based on his behavior in this trial, that Judge Merchan's one of those people. Does that mean it will happen? No. It just means that it certainly could. This is really supposed to be just a misdemeanor case. Again, this got elevated to a felony because Alvin Bragg was looking for a way to get Donald Trump. And so he's tried this novel legal theory that the jury accepted. So normally, it's a misdemeanor. There is no jail time for this as a misdemeanor. It's a first offense for Donald Trump. New York State right now has a habit of not putting people in jail for first offenses. But New York State's legal system has been particularly harsh against Donald Trump since 2016. And so that kind of takes, that puts a lot of this up in the air. There are multiple people who campaigned for public office promising the people of the state of New York that they would put Donald Trump behind bars. And that's the situation that they're now in. All of that assumes we even get to that day. There is a discussion amongst some people in the conservative wings to petition the Supreme Court directly to overthrow this. I don't know if the Supreme Court will do that. Supreme Court had a chance to help. In my mind, they had a chance to uphold the rule of law in Texas v. Pennsylvania back in 2020, and the Supreme Court decided not to. There's only been one member that's changed in the Supreme Court that punted on the Texas v. Pennsylvania case in 2020, and the Supreme Court that's there right now. So I'm not going to be able to predict what the Supreme Court necessarily will or won't do in this. It is theoretically possible they could step in and say, no, there are too many trial errors. This needs a redo. The Supreme Court of the state of New York theoretically could step in. There's a lot of stuff up in the air. And so to give you 100% prediction of what is going to happen, I think at this point it's a fool's errand. There's a lot of stuff that could happen. But that doesn't mean all of that stuff will.
No, absolutely. Other analysts on the national level have said pretty much the same thing, that this is just so unprecedented that they're not sure what could happen here, right? Everything really truly is up in the air. Something else that you talked about was that this was supposed to be a misdemeanor case, and that's exactly true. I understand through some research that I've been doing myself that it was bumped up to a felony charge because they found a way to pull connections to the election itself and the election integrity of itself, and that's kind of how that got bumped up.
Right.
Yeah, and so it definitely is a historical moment. Yesterday, I'm sure a lot of TVs were on as that verdict came down. This is the first former president to be convicted guilty in a state case like this. So a lot of eyes on this, and just to bring up some dates to come to paint a fuller picture and what's to come as well. So the Republican National Convention then comes Monday, July 15th through July 18th. That's just days after the sentencing on July 11th. And then after that, the first presidential debate, according to NBC, is set for June 27th. This is where we'll see President Biden and former President Donald Trump face to face again on the debate stage, and we'll hear from them. And that's set to take place. I think there is some talk that Trump might possibly not show up, but I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think we'll see them on the debate stage.
Trump's been asking for the debates, and Trump's actually asking for more debates. Here's one other aspect. How does this affect the campaign? Well, he was convicted on 34 counts. Yesterday, he raised $34.8 million. For folks on the left that thought that this was going to end Donald Trump's campaign, it's the single largest day of online campaign donors in the history of the United States of America. When Joe Biden had a big event in downtown New York City with Bill Clinton and with Barack Obama, so you have three presidents in the same room at the same time, Joe Biden made $25 million that day. Donald Trump got convicted on 34 counts, and he raised an extra $9 million over what Joe Biden got at that fundraiser in New York City, in about the same amount of time. So we are truly dealing with unprecedented stuff. Figuring out exactly where this is heading, that's a difficult thing. I have not seen a lot of people who were planning on voting for Donald Trump say because of this conviction they're not going to. I haven't seen that anecdotally. What I have seen is a lot of people who voted for Joe Biden 4 years ago, or at least say they voted for Joe Biden 4 years ago, now coming out and saying this verdict means they're going to vote for Donald Trump. So I definitely think this is going to change the field. I'm not convinced it's going to change it in the way that folks like Alvin Bragg and Letitia James thought it was going to.
Yeah. And then, a message that both campaign parties have put out there since this verdict came down is that, this will ultimately fall down to November 5th on election day. They're putting the final result, the final say in the hands of the people here by putting that message out there. So, it's a very historical moment for our country, and a lot of eyes will just be continuing to watch this unfold, but also ultimately coming down to election day here.
And I'm going to argue this is a dangerous time for American history, because either way you look at this, from the Trump point of view, this was an abuse of our legal system. And what this has done now is for many people across the country, they are now convinced that our legal system will not be fair to people based upon their political ideology. That is a dangerous moment for American history. For the left, if they are successful in this, they may be able to try and do this in other places. If you can get Donald Trump put in jail based on a law in Manhattan, then why couldn't we get the governor of Louisiana put in jail based on a law just in New Orleans? If you can go into a place where you can get a jury that is of an electorate of 95 to 5 in one party's direction, and you can convict the candidate from the other party in that jurisdiction, what we've done is we've broken the law, the legal system in this country, to where it really is, it's not about fighting for people who have actually been harmed by crimes. It now becomes about fighting for power, using the bench, using the courtroom as the way to accomplish that. And that is a very, very frightening time for a country like the United States of America, not just for us, but for the entire world. Because if the rule of law changes based upon what party you're in this country, what country can you expect to get justice in if you don't believe what the majority believes? That's a problem.
I mean, yeah, no, that's a good argument right there, and that is something that we are hearing a lot of from a lot of individuals. But I mean, it went through the justice system, so it was in the hands of the jurors, and sentencing will now be left in the hands of the judge. So we'll just be keeping our eyes on that. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Stephen. I really appreciate the discussion that we've had today. So thank you again. And you guys, for more details, you can see it all right here on ktalnews.com. We'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.